Welcome back to the channel. My name is Joe and this is UFC Collect Profit. So today we're going to do a little bit of a different type of video, it being January 1st, fresh start for 2026. I want to mix it up a little bit. So I want to give a little bit of history of, is a 50-year-old collector and somebody that's been doing this for a long time, to provide a little bit of a perspective of how I ended up into collecting UFC cards, sealed boxes, and where this journey kind of started. So the journey for collecting started a long time ago when I was 6 years old and collecting 1981 Topps football. I specifically remember buying that box, and the Joe Montana rookie was the big card in that set. And back then, collecting was so different than it is nowadays, just like everything else in life. And it was just about collecting cards with your friends. And, the financial aspect of it didn't play that much into it, but certainly did a little bit with Tough Stuff price guides and Beckett price guides and how they track the values of the cards. Back then, the numbers were a lot smaller. $1, $3, $5. Back then, for a lot of the modern cards, serial number cards weren't even a thing. I mean, my gosh, 1981 Topps football wasn't even a licensed product. A lot of people probably don't know that, but go look at the pictures of the cards. You will not see any logos of the teams on there. And so starting as a little kid, I had the collecting bug. I always enjoyed it. And then, going into high school, I remember collecting, or like middle school to high school, collecting pro set football. Going after the Barry Sanders rookie, the iconic rookie of his, wearing an Oklahoma Sooners uniform. Sorry, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, I think? Yeah, Oklahoma State. And, just, we used to have card shows at the mall. And there were big things back then. We would have a lot of different type of athletes show up, like Darryl Strawberry, the Mets, Don Mattingly, the Yankees. And it was just a simple thing. It wasn't complicated at all. 90 Leaf Baseball was released. That was kind of a big thing. Just like 89 Upper Deck before that with the Ken Griffey Jr. rookie premium product. I worked at a card store in South Florida called Tom Sports Cards and learned the business side of it and the concept of opening boxes. I mean, we even used to do breaks in the stores back then before the internet really took off. There were a little bit of things on the internet at that time. There was like a dealer net page where individuals can share pricing and things like that. AOL chat rooms were kind of a big thing back then, and forums to post items for sale. And you would run auctions back then on forums, and people would post the bids on the forum page, and you have to refresh it. I remember doing that for the shop to help, raise extra money. But fast forward, just kind of starting from, meager beginnings and enjoying the hobby and not really looking at to make money or as an investment. I don't think that was really looked at as a thing back then, at least at my age. I never ran into other collectors my age really into that. But I want to fast forward a little bit to like when it kind of dawned on me that this could be something bigger and something maybe a little more special. And something that a lot more people were involved in than I really thought about. So like in 2000, I would say 10, 2011, after being away from the hobby for a long time, I started to get back into collecting Michael Jordan, specifically the 86 Fleer rookie card and his 1984-85 Star 101 rookie. Some people would argue that's his rookie or isn't. I think nowadays it's considered more of his rookie. You have a large group of people online that push that narrative, and the card has skyrocketed in the past year. But back then, the Star Rookie's been around since 84-85. Like, that's always been in the conversation and kind of underneath the surface of all the collectors waiting for that card to overtake the 86 Fleer. And that's been talked about since, my gosh, I was 15, 16 years old. And nowadays, I would argue it has, at least from a monetary point of view. It certainly is a lot more scarce than the 86-87 Fleer. But the 86-87 Fleer was the crown jewel for a long time. And it's funny looking back how people were pushing that narrative and it finally took off. And I would argue that it was just a hardcore group of collectors that stuck with it. They have big money. They have a voice on social media. And people listen to them. And you kind of notice that too a little bit, that some of these individuals have ideas about collecting and it's kind of follow the leader, you know? But they stuck with it and it paid off big time for them. So anyway, to circle back to like that time, I bought a lot of Michael Jordan items and I ended up selling those through an auction house and making a substantial amount of money. And I was like, this is kind of interesting. It might be substantial for me. I think I bought some things and I sold them. I probably made like $10,000 and I was like, wow, so that's pretty cool. But I think what's different with me than most people is that I had a job. I was pretty disciplined financially. I mean, I had my ups and downs like everyone else, but I committed to the cause and I stuck with it. I didn't waver. I knew I wanted to be collectibles. I also have a normal job and I invest in a 401k and I have other retirement vehicles I deal with. I just believed in it. I'm not quite sure why I did. I guess because, especially, I would say the whole start of it was just growing up in the Michael Jordan era and seeing what that did to me as somebody swept up in that moment and then collecting the cards after he retired. I mean, the final shot against Utah was in 98. He came back with the Wizards in 2000, 2001. I mean, in 2010, Michael Jordan was out of the NBA 8 years at that point. And everybody moved on, and it was about LeBron and Kobe and all these other, new players. But people still cared about Michael Jordan. The prices were going up, and people were throwing a lot of money. And the rarer the cards and the autographs, like, it just took off. And it just opened my mind to, if people felt this way about Michael Jordan like I did, what if there were other areas, whether it be different sports or different collectibles, where somebody that got caught up in that, and at 40 years old, I still felt that passionately about it, there had to be other avenues where that kind of stuck as well. So I started exploring other areas. I started exploring Magic the Gathering, which is a trading card game, which also people can play the game. I'm not going to go into it, but I started investing in that. And then later on, I started investing in Pokemon. I remember Pokemon coming out, at least in my store, my area, in 1999. And the Charizards, the foil Charizards going for $100. I remember selling those in the store and opening the packs. Kind of crazy looking at it now. But I started to dabble in other areas and kind of spread my wings when I had a little more financial flexibility. Started getting into boxing, the 1951 ringside boxing set, 96 card set. I started to build one of the best PSA registry sets. I got up to number 3 on the list. So I bought that and I ended up selling it and like 5 timesing my money. And I was buying into things and selling it when it went up 3 to 5 times, sometimes 10 times. But the one card that blew me away was the Floyd Mayweather rookie. So it's the Browns Floyd Mayweather. I forget what year it was. I sold it on Golden Auctions. You can look up the sale. It was early COVID, I think is when it happened. And over this time before that, I was like buying and selling stuff and building up my war chest and taking it more seriously. Investing a lot more into Pokemon and at that time as well. Sealed booster boxes, what I was mostly purchased. And I remember buying the Floyd Mayweather for like $550 in a PSA 10. And I ended up auctioning off at Gold, and it set the all-time record for like $30,000. And I was like, whoa. Like, it just totally blew my mind. And I mean, making almost like 50, 60 times your investment was kind of mind-boggling to me. And it kind of re-expanded my mind to what's possible. And from there, I went heavy into Pokemon during COVID. Leading up to COVID, into COVID, just big time. UFC wasn't even on the radar yet. I remember in 2013 buying a box of Knockout and opening it up I saw some of those original cards somewhere in my collection. I remember enjoying UFC. I remember watching UFC and enjoying it with my friends, but I never collected the cards really. It wasn't even on my radar as something that would be investable. It was fun, but it like wasn't my thing. And my attention was caught in other areas. So now we go through COVID and everything spikes, goes up exponentially. I was lucky enough to sell off some things at that point and take advantage of that, take some money off the table, so to speak. And then, COVID ends. Pokemon kind of goes up and comes down. I kept buying Pokemon. I didn't stop. Again, UFC's not on the radar yet. Dabbled a little bit in football, seal wax. Still had some Jordan stuff in my collection. But, my collection is so large at this point. Like this behind me is a little bit of what I have. I have different storage areas. I have stuff stored at the vault at Fanatics. I have comics stored at a vault down in Texas. I have stuff stored all over the country and stuff stored locally in different areas as well. This is a little bit of some of the stuff I have. So you can see like Chrome Boxing, see some Hulk Hogan signed Funkos, Anthology, UFC, Midnight UFC, Finest, whatever. But kind of brings us to like modern day after doing really good on Michael Jordan stuff, Pokemon. And I still have a ton of Pokemon stuff from Sword and Shield era. I remember when cases of, you'll get a kick out of this. I remember when cases of Chilling Reign or boxes of Chilling Reign were like $79 a box, $80 a box. And the guy I was buying them from, like nobody believed in the product at the time. Like Chilling Reign fell in that. Fusion Strike, not so much, but Chilling Reign and Battle Styles, I remember, were the main two. Vivid Voltage also. And my guy was just getting endless supply, and he was just wanting to dump the items to me to boost his sales numbers as a distributor and then to get more allocation for product. And I remember for like 2 months straight, like every day I came home from work, there would just be piles and stacks of boxes. And my UPS guy was like, what are you doing, dude? I remember tipping him extra money and helping me out. And then I remember changing my, getting a different shipping address and sending stuff to a different spot. But I just never stopped. And anyway, fast forwarded to how I got in the UFC. So I remember reading about UFC going to Paramount and getting away from the pay-per-view model. And then reading a little bit on the history of UFC. There's a book called Cage Match, which I highly recommend reading if you want to know the history of the UFC. But it basically, like in a nutshell, UFC was always trying to get market share. And then it like went to Spike TV. And then like it had a little bit of the Spike TV share, which was like the male dominant channel at the time. That eventually like so much UFC content was on Spike TV, like they took it over. And then basically they got away from Spike TV and went to Fox. And like they keep growing and they always seem to time it right of when the right time is to take the next step. And they always have the right people as far as UFC fighters to carry the brand to the next level. Whether it be Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor, John Jones, Khabib. Like, they always seem to time it right. And Dana White and Ari Emanuel, who's another big investor in UFC and owns part of the company TKO. I definitely do a little research on it to understand my perspective, but I just felt that UFC, we're going to see a massive explosion of interest in the sport and more collectors come in, and it's not going to take much to move the needle. And then you're going to have collectors come in, then you're going to have older people my age come in and romanticize about UFC when they were younger, and they're going to want to connect with those moments. And after watching clips on YouTube and Instagram and shorts and TikTok and all this nonsense, my initial thought was like, I want to buy the older UFC product and relive those memories. So my belief and my theory on this is 2026 is going to be the year where UFC collectibles explode. And that is why I've gone all in on UFC collecting, sealed boxes, key individual cards, iconic cards in the history of the hobby. And that's the whole reason why I built a YouTube channel and started doing something to document the journey, because it would have been interesting to document the journey in 2010 and 2015 with the Michael Jordan era, going to 2020 with the Pokemon stuff, just every day, my beliefs on it and my thoughts on it, and to see how it would have played out. Really wouldn't have changed anything, I don't think, because I would have done it anyway. But there's something cool about documenting the journey and seeing if you're right. And I think I get a kick out of that a little bit. But it's also that sometimes the path to success, the end goal, isn't always visible. You don't always see it. Like even with UFC, like I'm still learning my way a little bit, still understanding the main players in the market. And there are a lot of big time spenders in the UFC market, more than I anticipated, which gives me a bullish perspective on it, that a lot more people, even before I thought about UFC investing or in this space as investors. But it also gives me hope of where it can go from here and what type of people are going to come into the hobby. But here's this book I've been reading, The Tao of Capital. Actually, I already read it. I'm rereading it again, by Mark Spitznagel. Austrian Investing in a Distorted World. Sounds very intelligent, but it's actually a very fascinating book. But it basically talks about, it's called the roundabout theory. And it's not just about investing, but it's also about the roundabout theory of life. There's sometimes the direct path and the obvious path that you see to go from A to B, while you may see it and it may feel right and it may look right and your instincts may tell you to do it, usually isn't the right way to look at a situation or a problem or the path to take. And I want to read an excerpt from the book here. And it talks about Tiger Woods. So I'm just going to read it from here. For instance, there was a lesson to be learned in the 2006 British Open of golf, which was won by Tiger Woods with what appeared at the time to be a counterintuitive and counterproductive strategy. On an extremely difficult course, Tiger Woods, one of the longest hitters on the tour at the time, retreated from his signature massive drives and instead teed off using only 4 and 5 irons meant for medium range play. The reason is that Woods inverted the mental process of the ordinary golf player. And this concept of inversion is a big deal in life. That when you're trying to solve a problem or trying to figure out where you want to go, you invert it and work from the backwards of your goal and work back. So invert, always invert. In his game, Woods looked beyond the fairway to the pin, not the green, but the pin. He then figured out where on the fairway his ball should land. That would give him the positional advantage of the optimal shot from which to approach the pin. Thus, his early shots were mere means for his advantageous later shots, with the ultimate end of an easy putt. So how does that relate to anything we're talking about with UFC investing? It's a good question. So the collectibles world is so hyped up right now, and I see so much money going into football, basketball, hockey, baseball, Pokemon, all these big numbers, all these big prices. And I look at UFC and the top cards fetch big money. But there are like some players in the NBA that have played like 1 or 2 seasons or they're not even that good. Like I'm not talking about like the breakout rookies like Cooper Flagg or stars like Anthony Edwards from the Timberwolves. But like mid-range players and their cards get 5 figures. Like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a card, and the sealed boxes go for a ton of money. Then I look at like a John Jones 2009 round 2 autograph card. Arguably like the most iconic card in the hobby. And you can get the blue autograph version of that for under $500. The red autograph, which is I believe it's out of 15, is up on eBay. Sorry, is up on Golden Auctions right now. And that is obviously, is it the grail of grail for UFC collecting? That card may go for $40,000 or $50,000. Like, the math doesn't make any sense to me because the impact of UFC and where I think it's going to go. If you look at all the great fighters in the UFC and you rank your top 10, even if you can't afford the top cards of the top 10 fighters in UFC, like whatever you think they are, John Jones, Khabib, St. Pierre, Conor McGregor, like go down the list. You can certainly get, some of the top 10 cards for pennies on the dollar compared to other sports. And I know that you can't compare UFC to the NBA as far as global reach. And I know they're different animals. And you have to be careful making these leaps of logic and being too overly optimistic. But I just think I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm totally going to be wrong on this. And that's fine too. I can live with being wrong. But my big bet on UFC, and part of my big bet is building an amazing single card collection, but also like getting up to $1 million in sealed UFC product. Then you take the other part of breakers and the culture on Whatnot and Fanatics Live and all these breaking streams, and how I think as people get more fed up with the price of modern product, like the new releases, you're going to see a whole different world of vintage breakers come out because the prices are more reasonable, the players or the fighters are more proven, and you're chasing those hits, and the nostalgia of that, I think, is going to cycle back. It'll take time, but I think it'll happen. And I think the possibilities for where UFC collecting can end up, boxing a little bit, but I'm not as bullish on boxing. We have to figure out where that's going to go. But boxing is now under TKO and Zuffa brand, and where they're trying to take that and reorganize all that, has potential as well. But this video is not about that. But I think if you're a collector in sports at all, you have any interest in UFC product, or you watched UFC or enjoy watching UFC, I think you owe it to yourself to at least do a little bit of research. Do a little research on the TKO stock ticker. Look up Ari Emanuel and his talks on TKO, where he sees mixed martial arts and combat sports going in an AI world, and what that means with more leisure time and people valuing in-person experiences more. Then how does that translate to collecting? And like another part of it too is that UFC fighters engage the collecting world, and they are all in on it and they have fun with it, and that's kind of cool too. So that's going to wrap up the video for today. Just wanted to do a little bit of a different type of video than I'm usually do. My belief in UFC is extremely high. I wouldn't be putting this much money into it. And I think people speak with their money and their beliefs. And you have a lot of people that talk, and a lot of people that say they're going to do, and a lot of people on the sidelines that talk about what everyone else is doing. I want to be in the arena. I want to put my chips on the table and see if this is right or wrong, or how long it takes for it to play out. So again, if you got a little something out of today's video, please like and comment down below. I would appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel for daily UFC content. And again, Dawa Capital, Austrian Investing, Distorted World, Mark Spitznagel. When I read this book, it blew my mind. The concepts in it are simple, but the way that Mark weaves these together and how you can relate it to anything in your life, but especially collectibles. I think this book cost me $16, but I would argue there's probably $1 million worth of information in here that you could glean from this and apply to your life, apply to your investments, apply to your temperament, your patience, your discipline, get a little something out of it. So with all that said, have a good one, and I will see you soon.